Hey folks, and welcome back. So this is a continuation of the video build series on my B-36D project. Project was done 10 or 12 years ago. I had over 4,000 pictures of the build, and I've had a lot of people say, could you do a video build series? And I'm doing one of my B-36 on my MSL1 and my C-130 and all of that stuff. If you're new to my channel, just sit through this first minute. You'll understand what I'm about, and if you enjoy it, stick around, watch the video. So what we're going to talk about is this project got 99.9% done. Actually got some primer on it. That's how close I was to finishing it, and a gentleman offered me more money than I thought anybody would ever offer for it. So I sold the airframe, kept the motors, ESCs, radio system, air system, but the plane got sold, and I did take some heat from my followers for not finishing it and flying it. But I've never had a hangar queen. So if you follow me, you know my planes always end up flying if I don't sell them, okay? So today we're going to talk about the nacelles. Everything else has been covered in other videos up to the nacelles. So if you want to see about the design, the fuselage, the bomb bays, aileron flaps, main gear, the links will be below that you can go and watch those videos. But today we're talking about nacelles. Before I get too far, if you're new to my channel, I'm obsessed with giant scale aircraft that are models, or radio control. I also am building an ultralight, and I'm trying to do updates on that. But if you're here to see RC, I am a madman when it comes to doing giant scale aircraft. That's where I get my high from, is designing from nothing my own airframes and then building them and flying them. Want to do a shout out real quick to one of my awesome sponsors, rtlfasteners.com. If you need any type of fastener that you could use in RC, okay, and I'm talking blind nuts, lock nuts, nylocks, Allens, metric, standard, servo screws, whatever you can conceive of, they've got it. So go to rtlfasteners.com. If you buy more than $50 a product and you use top secret code DA30, you're going to get 30% off that order. Spend more than $50, get 30% off. So let's get going here. So, and let me make this full screen for you. So early on, if you watch the other videos, especially the wing design video, you know I was going to put the motor in the leading edge of the wing and do a shaft back to the rear of the nacelle, and this was going to help get my center of gravity right on the airplane, or actually make the airplane a lot lighter, because I was not going to have to put any ballast in the nose of it. So this is where I was experimenting with doing this. I did an awful lot of testing and stuff on it, and it just, I guess my self-confidence wasn't to the point that I thought that this would be reliable. Everything about me and building model aircraft is reliability. Here I had an aluminum shaft. Here I used a carbon fiber shaft, which actually was extremely promising. This was my test rig that I was doing extensive testing in. But in the end, I just didn't have my self-confidence that this thing would be super simple. You know, I like the KISS principle, keep it super simple. And I was just afraid that this would be a maintenance nightmare. So what I ended up doing was I decided to build nacelles on the wings, and I was going to mount the motor on the trailing edge, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So basically, I went into CAD, and one of the things is that very few people noticed, but I always noticed because, you know, I'm the person that designed it. I exaggerated all the nacelles by 10% because I was afraid of cooling my motors. And in the end, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I wish I would have trusted that I could have gotten the proper ducting and cooling to the motors. But I made the nacelles a little bit bigger than they should have been. So you might notice in this video series here that the nacelles look a little bit fatter or a little pregnant. And that's because I intentionally made them 10% bigger. So I had a couple of challenges. I had nacelles that had to let the landing gear into them. And if you watch the landing gear video, you'll know how I had to build the doors and all the access in the nacelle. But one of the things that I have learned over the years in designing and building model aircraft is you need to think sometimes 5 or 6 steps ahead. If you're a full-scale pilot and you're flying IRS, if you're flying, oh my gosh, IFR, you know that you are way ahead of the airplane. You've got everything figured out. You're not chasing the airplane, okay? And essentially what you're trying to do is see the future, okay? See where you're going to be with that aircraft. Well, when you're designing something from scratch, you really need to be thinking 5 or 6 steps down the road, and what does that mean for making things fit in the nacelle, making things easy to sheet in the nacelle, how you're going to fiberglass the nacelle. You know, the skin under the wing might necessarily need to be glassed before you put the nacelles on. Now, one thing I want to point out here, and there's a lot of controversy about this back in the day, is the grain on my wing is running from the front to the back. And every time I show a picture of the wing, people's like, you don't know what you're doing. This was planned because of all the substringers I had in the wing and the way the spars were made. I did not need the skin to add any strength to the wing. Not to mention I was going to fiberglass it, and that is where I would get a little bit more rigidity in the wing. So I ran the sheeting because it was so thin from the leading edge to the trailing edge to get it to look completely smooth like aluminum. If I would have run that with the grain up and down the wing, you would have saw little dips and valleys because the skin was so thin. So if you're watching this video right now and you're wondering why I ran the grain that way, that's why I did it. And I cover that in my wing design video, which you can go back and watch. But keep in mind, I pretty much had to put the skin on and glass it before I put the nacelles on, because I wanted that fiberglass that ran the length of the wing to basically be the strength. And same thing on the bottom of the wing. I had to make sure that all the bulkheads or the formers and everything else in these nacelles lined up with any hardware or equipment that's going to work in it. I had to make sure that I printed what my cowling was going to look like and how everything was going to work on these nacelles. So there was just an awful lot of pre-planning, looking down the tracks and making sure I wasn't building myself into a corner that I'd have to go back in and cut something up on the wing. Here's an example of me needing to fiberglass some of the skin underneath where the wing, underneath where the nacelles were going to be. And then any fiberglass that was going to be on top of the wing would overlap that. And it was all light and it was all strong. I mean, as you can see in the spars, there was some carbon fiber. So I get an awful lot of people that are kit builders. They're not designers. There's somebody, or they're plan builders. There's somebody who builds from like a Zeroli plan, or they'll say, I've never seen it done like that, and I've been doing this for 5,000 years, and Abraham Lincoln was my poker partner. You know, here's the facts is, everybody, I have done a lot of this. Some of it's failed. A lot of it's worked. But if you're seeing something that you've never seen before, it's because I love to explore. I love to go where a lot of people don't go. So, you know, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's wrong. And I need to make sure my firewalls allowed plenty of air to get back to that motor. That's one reason these firewalls here, you saw earlier it was a solid firewall. Once I started thinking about that, that wouldn't work. I had to get air back to these electric motors. And if you've ever wondered why I like electric motors, it's the torque range. They have a very linear torque range. You can turn big, high-pitched props, and you don't have to rely on the top 10% of the RPM to get you like 90% of your power. That's the reason I love electric. I'm not trying to save the world, okay? I mean, I use geese to mop up all the oil in my garage when I drip oil. And if you notice with Dawn dish detergent, geese, they clean pretty good. And of course, I'm joking. And here is a picture of all the nacelles sitting on the wing with me just sitting back and kind of bench flying it, imagining this thing in the air. But these nacelles took an awful lot of patience to make sure I wasn't building myself into a corner, because I was really going into an area that I'm like, gosh, once I start to sheet this, am I going to have to cut a hatch in it? Am I going to have to get inside this? Am I going to have to cut the skin on the wing and maybe weaken that top fiberglass layer? There's just all kinds of things you've got to consider and think about. And I was really happy with how these turned out. I mean, I was just really super excited with the way they turned out. And But then, you know, and I'm going to do a video in the future about just the motors, so I'm not going to get too far into the Hacker motors here. But I wanted to make sure the way everything went into this aircraft, it just aligned and fit and worked perfect. And this was sheeting more of the nacelles. This is them getting a lot closer. And, you know, one of the things about me is once I've sheeted something, I hate to cut back into it. And if I do, I'm going to glass it and get it almost finished. That way, when I cut it out, it's at least a hatch that's going to hold the shape. So if you're going to have to put hatches in it, fiberglass it, even get it to primer before you cut that hatch out, and it should hold its shape. But if you just try to cut the wood out, sometimes the wood will try to straighten back out. Or however, by putting the fiberglass on there and the resin, it kind of holds the shape. And this was me fitting the actual cowlings on, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. And I was just super happy with the way the wing was turning out with the nacelles and everything. And they were functioning nacelles as far as air ducts, and I'm getting air back to my motors. So now we're going to talk about the cowlings. And this drove me nuts. You know, I love to share with everybody my highs and lows. And early on when I was learning fiberglass, I would have rather had a kidney stone than to have to fiberglass. I had really, well, the problem was, and I don't ever like to blame people. I always try to stay positive on my channel. I always try to praise people when they deserve it. But I had a couple of people lead me down the completely wrong path with fiberglassing. And it wasn't until I ran into an aerospace guy on YouTube, and he's like, Dag, I'm going to send you some information, and I think this is going to help you. And that person absolutely opened my eyes on how to do fiberglass inexpensively and get it to work every time. So basically 3D, I mean, I drew both in CAD and, well, my AutoCAD, and back in the time I had 3ds Max. Drew the cowlings, make sure everything looked right, and then I printed this, started cutting up parts. Now this is a plug I'm making right here. Okay, so you know so you understand I'm not making the cowl yet. This is a plug to make a fiberglass cowl. So this is me taking the 1/4 inch light ply from aircraft spruce and cutting out the parts, mounting it on the plane, making sure, yep, it looks right. Then I skinned it. And I think I used 1/8 inch or maybe 3/32. I can't remember what I used. Yeah. I think it's 3/32. And said, yepper, it's looking good. And then I sanded it. I glassed and primed it. So there is, I'm sorry, there's no glass on this, just priming. That's right, I just primed this. And then painted it and waxed it and polished it and waxed it and polished it. Then stuck it in my little moat, as I call it, or my little tank. I poured in that RTV green or whatever the heck it's called, and I apologize, I should have looked that up. But I then basically you pop it out and you get this mold. The reason this mold ended up being what I ended up using is because the flexibility of being able to pop it in and out, but I still wanted to keep the frame around it to hold the rigidity. So you want to keep that box, so you need to make it so you can screw and unscrew that box to be able to get your parts in and out. And that's where I had some challenges. So I started taking my 2-ounce cloth, laying it in there, wet it up. I think I put 3 layers in there and popped it out and said, yep, I like it, it's pretty neat. But then I did it a second time, and this is where I got really, really frustrated with the way it was or was not working. Essentially, it wouldn't come out of the mold easy, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And, you know, I would pop it out, and I tried to put inside it different formers, and it worked, but a lot of times I'd get wrinkles in it, or I'd crack it. And I was like, okay, screw this. And this is where I got led kind of down the wrong path. So I decided to build a dam. If you don't know what a dam is, you're going to make a 2-part mold. So then I basically glassed, put on 3 layers. I wet this up with wet system epoxy with a little bit of microballoons in it. And then you put on 2 or 3 layers of basically 4-ounce cloth. And you end up with 1/2 of a mold. Pop that off. Hated that because of all the air bubbles I got and all the problems I had. So I was like, what the hell? Then I went back to this and realized if I use the right mold release, okay, and this was the whole thing, and I cut an edge down the side of the mold. So you can see there's a little cut down the bottom of it there. I could get this to turn into my cowling factory. And it worked perfect. But, you know, I learned, okay? I mean, it was very frustrating, but this ended up being the way I went. And I was then in business making cowlings. I want you to notice that spinner there, though, because that spinner is what I'm going to finish this video with, but it was a very interesting story about this spinner, and it was absolutely so cool. Because the B-36 has a really interesting spinner in full scale. So that's what the cowling looked like, and that was in 2011, the master cowling that I was going to actually paint and was going to be on the airframe, and was on the airframe. And I was building cowlings, man. It was awesome times. So notice this picture right here. Notice how the rear of the spinner is right up against the cowling. Now, if I had just a flat spinner back there, there was going to be nowhere for the air to come out the back of the cowling. And the real B-36 would move the back of the cowling. They had a little, I don't know how to describe it, but a cylinder in there that would slide in and out. And that was their cooling for the motor, like cow flaps. So when the engine was cool, you could see a huge gap there. And when the engine was needing to warm up, they would close it and you would see it look like this. So I knew I had to do something special with these spinners to make it look scale. So I don't know if I can mention the names on YouTube, but a really cool college student and his professor was following me on the internet and said, we think we could machine you these really cool rings that would go on the back of your spinner and make it look just like a B-36 spinner. So they machined these for me, and they were absolutely beautiful. But one of the challenges, and it wasn't their fault at all, is I had to put holes in the back of this thing to make it screw to the back of my spinner. And I was terrified I wouldn't get it exactly right. So what I did was I screwed them on as close as I could, and then I put it on my lathe. And what I essentially did was the cone that I call it, that screws to the spinner, I very lightly machined that outside edge to get it to be exactly circular, and then I balanced it to make sure that it was going to be completely balanced. Because, you know, electric motors are just like gas motors. They spin, you know, these motors are going to spin about 6,000 or 7,000 RPM. So I wanted to really make sure the thing was balanced. But then when I put it into the cowling, it looked exactly like a B-36 spinner, and the cowling, the air could come out around the cowling to cool my motor, and it was happy days, everybody. I mean, this was such a cool part of the project to get this all right. And I just don't know how to express how cool it was that this college student, his professor, offered to help me with that. And I would love to mention their names, but I just don't like putting names out on Facebook because I don't know if they want to be named. And so yeah, so the next video we're going to aim just at the motors and talk about the motors. And that's this video, everybody. So look, the reason I do these videos is really kind of 2 things. One is to tell you how I learned to do this, because I pretty much self-taught myself 99% of this. A lot of the input I get from people are wrong. It's people that look at it that never did it, and then I go and do it and realize they're wrong. And I'm not saying that I'm not mad at them. I get frustrated at myself. But there are so many experts out there on YouTube and in the world that will look at something and they don't understand it, and they'll give their opinion as if you should try it and it would work. Most people won't say, hey, I have no idea what you're doing, but here's an idea. Okay? Most people say, well, here's an idea, try this. So all I'm trying to do is tell you that I spend a ginormous amount of money in this hobby on things that didn't work because other people had recommended do it and they didn't know what they're talking about. So sometimes people think I'm a prick because they'll say, hey, why don't you try this and this and this, and they think I'm ignoring them. Well, there's a couple of reasons I might be ignoring them. One is I already have the solution figured out. I already know what I'm going to do. But I listen to everybody and I just weigh that and say, does that make sense? With my experience now of building these giant scalar planes, does that make sense? You know, a lot of people, when I mention trolls, they think the trolls bother me. And the trolls really don't bother me. I mean, all of my videos I've ever posted, I think I've had maybe 20 dislikes or something like that. And now they don't even show it on YouTube. So I think I'm doing pretty good with the people that follow me, that give me the likes versus the dislikes. But I always try to consider everything. You know, I love to be in a room full of engineers and somebody says, let's try to do this. And everybody says, let's find out if it'll work. Because that person who says, oh, that won't work, everybody in the room is going to look at it and go, how do you know it's not going to work? And I cross this all the time in my life when people, their knee-jerk reaction is, well, that won't work. And my question is, why won't it? Have you done it before? Oh, no, I've never done it, but look at that. Not knowing doesn't mean it won't work. Going into the unknown doesn't mean it won't work. So all I'm trying to say is if you're a builder or a maker or you're a kid that's using foam and cutting it up and sticking motors on a contraption and fly it, go with your instinct. The worst thing you're going to do is learn. Okay? The best thing you're going to do is you're going to have fun. And the negativity in life against designers and creators, the negativity against not wanting to explore is really hampering our creative juices. And I run across it in every facet of my life. You know, I'll sit in a meeting where there are 5 people that have no idea what they're talking about, but people listening to them because they talk more. And I sit there and just think, why am I even a part of this? If we got 6 people in the room and 1 knows the answer and 5 don't, why are we even listening to these 5 people? Now, granted, we should always entertain the idea that we can learn more. But imagine this, and then I'm going to shut this video down. Imagine you're sitting in a room with 6 people. 1 speaks fluent English, and the other 5 speak only German. How successful do you think you're going to be at creating a narrative when 5 people have no idea what you're talking about? And with an engineering and design, being a maker, being creative, that happens a lot where you will be in a room with people that have no idea what you're doing or how you're doing it, but they try to have an opinion. And navigating that, especially when it's your own money and it's your hobby, can be frustrating. So if you're a builder out there, and what I mean by that is anybody can buy a set of plans, buy the wood, and if they're very meticulous and cut out everything per those plans and they build it, they can build an airplane, okay, model airplane. But very few people can create their own CAD drawings and make an airframe and go where a lot of people don't go without having challenges. And I don't mind the challenges if it's me learning. But when people tell me, oh no, that won't work, in the early days I'd listen to them. Bottom line is they didn't know what they're talking about. So I hope I didn't get too deep here at the end, but I just want people to understand that when you're designing something, it's your own personal dream. Somewhere in your brain, in that noggin of yours, you visualize what this thing's going to look like. And stay with that. Okay, don't let anybody ever deter you from your dream. Especially when it comes into the whole engineering and creative and the physics and all the stuff we do with model aviation. If you know you're right, then just stay the course. Like I say, the worst thing you can do is learn. or you can blow a lot of money if you listen to people that don't know what the hell they're talking about. So rock on. Make sure you always involve kids in flying. If you've watched any of my videos, and if you've sat this long through the video, you must like what I'm saying. But we've got to keep kids in model aviation. Okay, we've got to embrace the drones, the quads, the hand-launched gliders, the helicopters. We need to embrace anything that is radio control that flies. Blimps, I don't care what it is. Okay, if you're 16, 18, watching this, you're going to run across some people in our hobby that will always not be having fun, and they want to infect you with that not being fun. Get away from those people, or just tell them you don't want to listen to their BS. So if you're young, please be in the hobby. If you're an old fart, get the heck out, go ruin somebody's golf game. Okay? And my definition of old fart is that person who hates the kids flying cool things. So rock on, everybody. I'll see you next time. Sorry for being so chatty. And rock on. Be safe and go fly and take a kid flying. See ya.